Several of you are mayors or administrating very, very rapidly growing cities. Several of you mentioned fast urbanization, migration coming to cities. And you need to provide services. You need to provide access to potable water to all these people. I'm wondering how you are coping with this situation, how you are doing concretely. Isa, you mentioned rapid urbanization too. How is Rwanda coping with this situation? How's Rwanda able to supply water to the new urban populations?
One problem we are having with the fast urbanization and agriculture and the rest of it is that even the water source is being compromised. When people do agriculture near rivers and lakes, they end up drying. So what we've done, we have had a land use master plan for the whole country, and we have a law on environment protection that has defined areas that should be protected from human settlement and human-like works. And that is helping us to reclaim nature and also to be able to have our good water sources. Then secondly, is now getting this water to the people. We have a challenge that we've got a high terrain. We've got mountains and hills back at home and valleys. And that is costly in terms of establishing infrastructure. And that means that when getting the water from the lower source up, you have to pump it. So using gravity systems is minimal. You find that the cost of it in terms of maintenance is high.
Hyderabad is obviously one of the cities that comes to our mind when we think about very, very fast-growing cities. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned this problem too. How is Hyderabad managing to supply water to its inhabitants, but above all to its new inhabitants?
The city being very old city, 400 years old, we had already built old reservoirs from where we were supplying water to the moderate population. But because of huge influx of the population in the recent years, there is a need to plan for water from other sources. We have a perennial water called Krishna, which is about 150 kilometers away from the city. We have pumping systems. 2 phases of this drinking water supply scheme has already been implemented, and about 180 mgd of water is being drawn from there.
The question is larger. I mean, it's also about reducing consumption. It's about fighting against the waste of water and losses in the system. So I would like to ask Mary Jane, from her experience from San Fernando, how are you fighting against these problems on the management side?
One other thing that we did was to encourage the dry sanitation, ecological sanitation, because we said if you don't have enough supply of water, then perhaps you should reduce the use of water. And so this is where I decided to fund, through our city, 1 million pesos for this dry sanitation. And with this, I'd like to say that it introduced us to the whole world of sanitation. We discovered that our sanitation code was so outmoded. It was 1947 and never updated. And so we came up with a sanitation plan. We came up with a sanitation code, which may be usual for a developed city. But for a developing city, it's something that strikes you that you've not done it.
The US are known as a country with very, very high water consumption.
Absolutely. And just to give you an idea, to compare and contrast with some of the pictures that we saw up on this screen behind us this morning, it absolutely struck me when I saw the picture of the little boy sitting in the very small bucket of sudsy water. The people in my town consume 244 gallons per capita per day. Now, why is that? A lot of it's commercial. But it's also because we have people who have large pieces of property and insist on having sweeping green turf. And that means watering it all the time. The challenge is, educating the population, but also including additional regulation.
E mais governança mundial, dando parâmetros para que o Norte e o Sul se relacionem de forma mais equilibrada. Simplicidade voluntária, mais governança mundial.
Coming back to the question that you have just raising about reducing the demand, so if we are not just talking about the supply side, but also reducing the demand, this doesn't apply just for the water resources, but also for the energy, for example. And the comparison that Eduardo is doing is that the three major fortunes in this world are the equivalent to the GDP, I think that's what you said, the GDP of 50 countries. And this raised the question about the political economy. So North-South relations, North-South, and how we are going to tackle this question.
Speaking about North-South relations, it's maybe a question to ask the mayors from the northern cities amongst us. Cities are not only victims of climate change, they are obviously also a reason for climate change. And this will impact the water resources. So I'm wondering what cities are doing to reduce the carbon footprint, for example, Stockholm.
Yes, that is of course very important, and that's central now in our city planning to reduce carbonite and reduce everything that can affect the climate. And I think that, for example, transportation is one very important area when it comes to that. In Sweden, in Stockholm, public transportation is one key to build a green city. And I think that today it's natural for us. We are building in Stockholm and planning what we call eco-friendly city districts. And a natural part in that is to plan to reduce the use of water, actually.
I'm wondering where the money for investment should come from. Should water supply be in the hands of administration? Or have you got experiences in your cities that water supply is in the hands of private companies?
You know, we have in France a choice between the private system to manage water, contract of different duration with a water company, or the management by the special service of the town, of course, public service of the town. And it's in France, it's a constant source of arguments and political turmoil in France. And what is my position? Be pragmatic. Be pragmatic. Look where the interest of the city is, and remember the old says, when it works, don't fix it.
The difference is if it's the utility is well managed or badly managed. And you know, you can find a public utility which is well managed or a public utility which is badly managed. And by the way, you can also find private utilities awfully managed and some of them good, you know, well managed. And then there's no magic solution. There's no something that you apply, you know, one or the other, and you have arranged the problem. No, it's much more complex. It depends on the local conditions, on the legal institutions that you have to avoid corruption. It depends on a lot of different things.
I would just like to share with you my experience, because water in our city was being handled by in all cities in the Philippines, is under the national government. And so when I wanted to borrow for drainage, they said there is a fund here, a window of the World Bank, and you can borrow for drainage only if you can borrow also for sewerage. And I said, but how can I borrow for something that is not my authority? We were able to compromise. So they said, all right, if you're willing to do mitigating measures for your sewerage, are you willing to buy a dredging machine to clean your waterways, your canals? Are you willing to buy a vacuum tanker to clean your drainage canals? And I said, yes. So then they said, we can lend you money only for drainage, but with mitigating measures on sewerage.
I think that China, as the national government, has put water as a top priority now. Could you just explain what decisions have been taken recently?
建成处理厂之后，把这个中水啊再回用，用到工业企业，所以说是应该说充分利用了，也是。我就说这么多。
The first point is that the government pay much attention to water conservation. For example, in his city, the city invested a lot of money in reforestation in the water source areas. The second point is that water resources protection in his own area. In China, the central government enforced a rule for water pollution control. Each region or each city should guarantee the water quality in its own area. Between the two cities, there is a section monitoring station. According to the water quality monitored here, the upstream area, the upstream city, will be penalized if the water seriously polluted.
How's the situation in Rwanda? Is political campaign for elections, for example, on water topics thinkable?
Water is very key to the lives of the people, and I think it's a basic right. So yes, it is, and it goes beyond maybe using it as an issue for campaigning to being accountable. What happens back at home is we have established a system to help us walk the talk. So what you promise you'll do, you have to have funding for it. And we have developed a system which we call the performance contract, where the mayors work through from the grassroots, define their priorities, and put them in line with the MDGs and what we call our Vision 2020, and come up with what will be done, which will be supported both by our national budget and the local government budget. And once that is done, the performance contract is actually signed between the mayor and the president.
Thank you.